Hey there, and welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're fueled by the incredible clients who inspire us every day, allowing us to elevate their health and fitness journeys. On this show, you'll gain valuable insights from top professionals, hear inspiring transformation stories, and discover the knowledge and motivation to create your own best life. Let's dive in. As someone who has continuously used therapy as a way to heal and elevate my personal performance, I know wholeheartedly that you cannot always read the label when you're in the jar. And that's why it's so helpful to have a professional in your corner to talk to. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide our listeners with the opportunity to work with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. Receive 10% off your first month when you sign up by going to betterhelp.com/TFL. That's betterhelp.com/T as in think, F as in fitness, L as in life. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who can help.
All right, welcome back to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're going to dive into topics on stretching. Is it beneficial? Is it not beneficial? We're going to talk about regaining core and pelvic control post-pregnancy, postpartum, and how to get back on track and how we drive our clients to get back after having a kid. And sometimes there's tears, sometimes there's surgery, sometimes there's much more going on. How to get back from that sort of injury, we'll call it, but how to get back on track, because there's a lot of people always ask these questions, and there's a lot of mothers out there that want to get back to their body that they had pre-baby, and it can be done. And we'll dive into how to do that, but mainly how to regain the core and pelvic control. And then we'll talk about why people had poor breathing mechanics but can still manage squats, deadlifts, lifts with no pain. And we'll dive into that. First thing we are going to talk about is stretching. Is it good? Does it work? Does it not work? We get a lot of questions when people start talking about, oh, I have ankle tightness, I have hip tightness. We're going to use certain bands to stretch the hips, certain bands to distract the ankles, which I think is all fine. Some people don't like that. It's not my repertoire to go to, but if some people learn it and some people know how to coach it, by all means, go to it. But in general, stretching, many doctors, many PTs, when someone's injured or feels tight, they are going to recommend to stretch the tissue, which is been around for a while. And when I was younger as a coach, I first would adhere by it. Okay, we need to stretch the tissue. We need to lengthen this tissue. As I further developed my education and went into more coursework and more understanding of biomechanics and the human axial system, I stopped stretching. Yes, stopped stretching completely. I don't even stretch after my workouts, believe it or not. Most people, when they hear that, they are, whoa, are you kidding me? Are you serious? You're a strength coach, you're a personal trainer, you're into health and fitness, but you don't stretch. Nope, don't stretch at all. But I can also maintain the degrees of flexibility that I need to function as a human. What does that mean? We've talked on previous episodes about positions, posture, air, breathing mechanics. Well, the system needs to have balance. Left side, right side, front, back. It needs to balance. And it works in a system of tensegrity. There's tension holding us up through muscles, through joints, through ligaments. All holds our axial skeletal system upright. But when things start to get out of balance, unbalanced, and we start shifting maybe to more one side, or we shift more forward or back, that tensegrity system needs to compensate or accommodate for the center of mass changing, whether forward, back, side to side, up, down. What happens is tissues become more concentric. They become tighter to hold us upright against gravity, to hold us in positions that we feel comfortable with, to hold us in positions that we feel safe in. Then that tissue accommodates to that tension, and it will constantly stay tight over and over again. And then people start to stretch that tissue, but what they're missing is they're not rebalancing the system. Our human system is based off of upright activity and forward locomotion, and it's based off how to stay safe and how to stay alive. Its main goal is for movement from side to side, and then it's managing air pressure as we breathe in and out, and thousands of other processes through the body. When we become unbalanced, all of that changes. Gravity slightly changes. Air pressure management changes. But yet the body still needs to do all of these functions because that's not going to stop. The body's going to continue to do what it does best. That's function, that moves. This function, it moves forward, it drives, it does sports, whatever you name it, it's going to figure out how to do it. And it also doesn't care how it does it. If the tissues are tight or the body's out of position, your brain's going to know that through pain. It's going to know it through a tightness feeling. It's going to know that through a limitation of movement. I don't stretch because I'm looking at the system saying we need to balance the system first. Now, if we get the system to be balanced, then it is fair game. We can stretch away. But we need to have the system balanced, and that really starts with the pelvis, making sure the pelvis is in a position where it can posteriorly rotate, anteriorly rotate, and go back and forth. The hip flexors can shut off. The lower back can shut off. Then as you inhibit those muscles, you now can then go stretch muscles, hip flexors, quads, that won't get further locked because you're still in a state of tightness. Many people get confused when they come in for assessments and they tell me, oh, my hamstrings are tight, my low back's tight, and I have sciatica. And there's pins and needles and nerve sensation running down my leg. And I go, okay, what are we doing for that? And they're going, oh, a lot of stretching. And I love to get them with, don't stretch the hamstrings. It could be making them worse. Because when tissue feels tight, that doesn't necessarily mean it's short and tight or it's pulling things tight. It could actually mean that the tissue is long and its perception of feeling tight is that tissue is getting stretched apart because it's trying to pull the body or pull the body in a position or hold the body up. When you're assessing your own tightness, be very aware of what is the body trying to do with this. Is the muscle or tissue in a lengthened position and it feels tight because it's being pulled apart from attachment sites? Think of a rubber band. If you have a rubber band and you pull that thing tight, that tissue is long, but it's going to perceive tight. Most people, I think of tight tissues as these tissues are pulling together and they're short. Now, that can also be a scenario. You can have tissues that are pulling tight together and sensed being tight because the tissue is now concentrically oriented, where if it's lengthened, it's eccentrically oriented. And that's going to depend on what part of the body we're looking at. Is it the front side of the body or is it the back side of the body? A lot of the times the hamstrings will feel tight with the lower back because the pelvis is dropping forward or tipping forward. Those hamstrings are becoming very long from their attachment points on the back of the knee, to the ischial tuberosities. That position is getting long. It's lengthening, but your hamstrings are also trying to hold you up against gravity. The hamstrings are telling your brain, we need to be tight. We need to work to hold you back up. If not, you'll fall over. Hence where it's tight. On the front side, because the pelvis is tipping forward, the quads will be now a primary mover of the system to pull the system forward, aka pulling the hips forward when we're walking or running. They will become concentrically oriented, depends, not always, in a position where they are now short and strong to help assist movement going forward and to help move the body. It can get kind of complex when we're looking at Why are tissues tight? Same thing with anterior and posterior necks. Upper traps get really tight because they might be trying to pull the collarbone up. They might be trying to pull the arm up, the scap up. They're short and tight, but then they can be long and tight if that head's going too far forward and the shoulder blade is depressed or one shoulder is lower than the other. Now you have an eccentric tissue trying to create a position through the brain, through the cranium, the skull, through the spine, through the clavicle and the shoulder blade, as it's going to be perceived as tight. All of these things can be perceived as tight, but they're just in a different position. This is where, when we go into stretching, we need to be aware of what we're feeling, and we need to move the axial skeleton first. And what we mean by the axial skeleton is we need to move the rib cage and pelvis first before we set a stretch. An example would be a hip flexor stretch, whether it's half kneeling or on a table. In order to stretch the hip flexors, we need to first take tension or slack off the hip flexors. We need them to relax. If the lower back is constantly arched and we have hips going forward, that's going to tell us that the lumbar spine is in extension and the hip flexors are pulling that spine forward and down, along with the hips. We would need to counterbalance that unbalance, and by pulling the hips back, tucking the pelvis under, then we can stretch the hip flexor. We can squeeze the glute. We can pull the lower leg towards the butt to feel the quad and hip flexor stretch. There's many things we can do. Going back into that conversation of balance versus unbalanced. If your body feels unbalanced when we're stretching, the stretch is not going to drive any sort of significant change in tension understanding from the brain or muscle tension relationship. It's not going to change. We need to balance the core system, the axial system first, then we can go into stretches. Same thing with the neck. I get this very common with the neck and upper traps because it is hard to stretch the traps. Well, I was taught to stretch the traps way back when I was going through undergrad and grad school, is grab 2 heavy dumbbells and let them pull your shoulder blades down. I guess that's one way to stretch them, but I never felt that really worked for me until I found out how rib cage mechanics works. And as you exhale and you pull the ribs down, the whole rib cage is going to go down towards the hips. Then you can turn the neck to one side, and then you'll feel the stretch. As the ribs are moving, you're also going to get the clavicle and shoulder blade to move. And if those go down with the shoulder, then your upper trap can be put on a stretch and you can open up subs and fascia, all of the neck muscles, to understand decompression and expansion without being over tight. That's one way. If you do have tight hip flexors or tight back, work the pelvis to balance that out. If you have tight neck, work the balance of the rib cage going down away from the neck to help those muscles lengthen if they feel super tight. If your shoulders are already down and you feel tight, you can then just start rotating the head side to side and feel where that allows that tissue to expand. That's my take on stretching. When I tell people not to stretch, it's not because stretching's a bad thing. It's because I don't want people to stretch in a position of extension and tightness and create more issues, more pathologies, more accommodation or compensation patterns, because they're not allowing their autonomic nervous system to come out of a sympathetic, tight tone state into more of a parasympathetic, relaxed tone state. And that's when you can stretch muscles. Very similar to the state of what yoga does. Yoga is very breathing intensive. Exhale, feel the body calm down and move into that lengthening stretch position. That's the same thing we need the body to get into when we start talking about how to alleviate tension and tone from tissues that feel tight. My recommendations for a lot of that stuff is repositioning and repatterning. I'm big into PRI. A lot of people know that. That's my background, is postural restoration. The first time listening, I am postural restoration trained. It's what I've been studying for the past 8 years. And I use a lot of their repositioning and repatterning techniques to decrease tension, different body parts. For an example, we talked about stretching the hip flexors. Where I can stretch the hip flexors without actually touching or stretching is a supine position. Inhale, exhale, as we're rounding our middle back, T8 to T12, down to the ground, creating flexion, and then tucking the pelvis under, creating a posterior pelvic tilt through the pelvis, squeezing the glutes and abs together as we are breathing to allow the hip flexors to sense that they don't need to be on in that position. After 2 rounds of 5 inhales and exhales, I'll see a different tone of the hip flexors because we just changed tone throughout the whole system. That's how I really love to attack the body, from a neurological way of taking tone out of the system and allowing those muscles to relax. There's other ways to do it. During my lifting, I also to use RPR, which is reflexive performance reset, where you're taking your hand or your fingers and you are rubbing, you're stimulating an area of the body to get a tissue effect, to get a neurological effect, to maybe inhibit some muscle chains or activate some muscle chains to get a different tone or response out of those tissues. And that can be done with taking your hands, rubbing it on the back of your skull. That's going to equate with glutes, and then you'll be able to kind of sense and feel those glutes work. Same thing with inner thighs. I'm sure you've seen weightlifters do it. If you ever watch a weightlifter competition, they'll take their hand or inner thighs and rub the inner thighs, rub the glutes to get sensory aware of the muscles working and to bring awareness to it. Everything is neurological, and we need to treat the body more neurological than we were initially taught. A lot of people, including myself, were brought up with a orthopedic-minded muscle-bone relationship, but we have to add the fact.
All right,
of
a quick
the
step aside to
neurological
hear
system,
from
the
one of our
brain that
sponsors.
sits on
If you're looking
our
to
body.
improve your nutrition game and get to those goals,
Advanced Molecular Labs is dedicated to top quality supplements, whether it's for performance, recovery, sleep, or weight loss. They create supplements based on the latest scientific research. Many people have a supplement shelf in their kitchen, and just like us, we want it to be the best quality products that can support overall health each day. Check out advancedmolecularlabs.com and start getting your nutrition right.
use the code TFL35 for 35% off your order.
Getting into our second topic about regaining core and pelvic control post-pregnancy. Whether injured or not, we get a lot of these questions. We've had a lot of clients go through having kids and going through the training process of when you're training while pregnant versus then coming back. And the biggest thing right off the bat, I'll have to say, is if you are pregnant or going to have a child and you are kind of in the back of your head, not concerned, but you are aware of what's going to happen to the core and the pelvic floor, it is going to lengthen. It is going to it could get torn. It can get damaged, but it's going to be lengthened and the sense might go away. Start preemptively working out and core strength and core work before and during pregnancy, because the more in control of the core and sense of tension that you can give in a good way to the body, the quicker it is to recover. I've had many clients that I've worked with for years. Once they become pregnant, they're still on their normal training routine with core and abs. It changes a little bit because of, position of the baby and what their position is. And of course, as the baby grows, their core becomes more lengthened, but it's a different challenge. But if you set the system up early for success, the recovery time after giving birth is going to be a better and easier way. Now, that's if there's no complications. But getting that core training in sets you up. Once you're post 6-week postpartum, you can start getting back into the regimen of working out. Now, that does not mean that once you get back right into it, that you are all of a sudden going to have abs again and you're going to feel core you did before. It's the most physiological, disruptive event that a human can go through. The body is pretty beat up. It's lengthened. It's probably micro tears or maybe even torn. You have to let it heal, and then we have to repattern and resync up the core and pelvic control together. And this comes back to a lot of work with syncing up not only the abs, but syncing up the pelvis. A lot of times when a lot of people do core work, they're just thinking, okay, I need to squeeze my abs, squeeze my abs. The bottom of our core is our pelvis, is our pelvic floor. We have a diaphragm that sits in the rib cage, and then we have this pelvic floor, which are a bunch of different muscles, but it creates this pelvic floor diaphragm. And as we breathe in, the diaphragm pushes the guts down into the pelvic diaphragm, and vice versa. When we breathe out, we create a dome, and we create a dome through the pelvic outlet, the pelvic floor muscles. What we need to do is very, very importantly, we need to train those pelvic floor muscles for control and for sense. Now, this is where I love this question, because a lot of people always say, well, I don't get what the pelvic floor is, or I can't really feel the pelvic floor. And does that just mean Kegels? Well, glad you asked. Because how we look at the pelvic floor is you're going to get pelvic floor activation by first being able to put the pelvises left and right in different positions. What that means is, we talked about earlier, we talked about anterior pelvic tilt, pelvis going forward. Then we talked about pelvis going back. And as the pelvis is going forward and back, it's also coming into internal rotation and adduction, or going out into abduction and external rotation. To get a pelvic outlet to open up and to be able to breathe in it, the biggest thing for pelvic floor is going to be our adductors, which are the muscles in the inner thigh that connect up into and attach onto the pelvis. When the knees squeeze together, the pelvic outlet will open up, as the pelvic inlet will adduct. That pelvic outlet will abduct and open up, allowing for air, then the organs and the guts to be able to breathe and move through it. This creates pelvic floor strengthening via the muscles of the pelvic floor as we're squeezing the adductors and glutes together. We can access the pelvic floor muscles by training the big muscles that we can sense: glute max, glute med, adductors. Those are going to be the key to sensing and feeling that pelvic floor work. Now, when the pelvis is tipped forward, anterior tilted and externally rotated, we get more of a descended pelvis. We want to be able to pull that pelvic floor up. That's where the pelvis tipping back into posterior pelvic tilt with some IR or squeezing a ball is going to retrain the adductors, the abs, and the glutes to work to support that pelvic floor through controlled breathing, because it's pressure management. As we breathe in and that diaphragm pushes down, that's when the pelvic floor wants to go down. And if we let it just go down and collapse and have no control of it, then we're going to lose control and tension of those muscles. And we want to keep tension of those muscles to be able to bring the pelvic function back. You don't have incontinence, you don't have any pelvic floor issues. And then you can be able to sense your abs working together. What that would look beginning when I have someone 6 weeks postpartum and they're getting back into a strength training routine with me or workouts, it's very simple. We're doing a lot of glute bridges or pelvic scoops, I call them, with squeezing a ball or towel roll between the thighs, sensing the adductors on, the glutes on, but more importantly, sensing the T8 to T12, the middle part of the spine rounding back in an exhaled state to feel the abdominals pulling the rib cage down and together towards the pelvis. pelvis coming up towards the rib cage. As we exhale, bringing the rib cage down towards the pelvis. Sitting there for 3 sets of 5 inhales and exhales, then bringing one leg up, feeling the adductor on, feeling those glutes work, feeling those abs work as we're breathing. Then we get up to upright squat position or single leg position. I'm still guiding the sense of, can you tuck your hips posteriorly under? Feel a left glute or right glute. Exhale and feel the abs stack on top of that hip and feel your inner thigh working. That tells me we can start syncing up abs and adductors and glutes to help that function. Then all ab training is really on the board. I start off with a lot of all fours, a lot of all four concentric exhales, pulling the ribs towards the hips, hips up to the ribs, building people's sense of pressure back. That's the one thing I found with a lot of people, or with a lot of clients after giving birth, is they lose the sense of creating that exhale and pressure sense. And that's going to be the big thing to build on, is as you exhale, squeezing down, feeling the lateral sides of the rib cage engage. Things modified side planks are really good at first. I tend to stay away from a lot of sit-ups right at first because I'm not working muscles of lengthening and shortening right off the bat. I'm looking more, can we exhale and keep a position of opposition so the lower back doesn't kick on? We feel those abs working. And then as we breathe through, we're not losing that sense of abs. Now, if someone does have a big tear or a tear in the abs, that might take a little bit longer to heal. And it might just take a little bit longer to sense and feel things going on. That might be normal. I've had clients that have had, after a C-section, they've had, a scar there, and it just takes a little bit longer to bring in the healed tissue in sense of awareness. But over time, keep going at it, keep working on the breathing, keep working on different ab positions, and you'll be able to build and build and build tension. But as you work breathing techniques and breathing ab work every single day, it will come back. It's all about feeling and sensing and working a big exhalation, setting the abdominals, and then taking another inhale in, feeling those abs stay engaged as you breathe in, and then exhaling in, building back. And as you build back each and every day in different positions, you're going to start to bring in more pelvic floor control, more abdominal control. But there's no secret one specific ab exercise you do. A lot of times it's maintaining that breathing pattern I just said and going forward through that and progressing slowly through your training program as you get back. First week is just kind of inoculation back into the workouts. They're going to feel sore. They haven't done that in a while. And then it's starting to ramp up and giving them more and more as they build back to their pre-pregnancy status of sense of tissue, muscle demand, everything else. And you have to also remember that recovery is the big thing because you have a brand new baby and there's a lot to be done. There's not a lot of sleep going on. It might take a little bit longer, but that's the natural process of it. But set yourself up at the beginning. Exercise thoroughly. Then as you're pregnant, really exercise as much as you can through pregnancy to set yourself up to rebound afterwards in a good state. And that kind of ties into our last topic. Why some people with poor breathing mechanics can still manage squats, deadlifts, and lifts with no pain. Because it can be very, very complicated when some people don't know how to manage air pressure and other people don't, and they can still move without pain. Now, let's back it up. Poor breathing mechanics or poor breathing pattern. That's kind of a very generalized statement. And most people, I'm not going to say it's poor. Most people just don't have optimal breathing mechanics. And it's because we're human. We are upright against gravity. Gravity changes our perception of where airflow likes to go, where fluid likes to go. It likes to go down because of gravity. Sometimes we don't breathe as much up into the upper ribs and upper lungs as we do. Then we have Then we have certain patterns and positions that the human body gets stuck in or is held in because of the postural demands of gravity in our life and our development that changes how we breathe and changes the mechanics of where air goes. When it's never the point I never say, oh, people have poor breathing mechanics. Some people do when we do tests and they can't apically expand both chest walls. They'll feel it. It's not optimal. But usually people with poor breathing mechanics, they'll still have issues when it comes to working out because they can't manage the pressure. Now, that might not happen at lesser weights. That stuff can be really weight dependent because of the load we're putting on the body. When we're doing a lot of body weight stuff, there's not a lot of load that's stressing the system and threatening the system to go more into a sympathetic overdrive, extensive state for survival. If it's lighter weight, they're probably going to be able to get away with it, not having the best breathing mechanics or the best opposition to the abs. And we talked earlier, the abs and glutes and hamstrings and adductors with a good exhale is going to help set proper breathing mechanics in proper tension setting for lifts, squat, deadlifts, cleans, or rows or whatever. And this can easily be sensed if you are doing a row or an exercise and you go to move that weight and you feel your back initiating movement. That's one sign that you're probably using more posterior chain muscles to move that weight, which means you can't compress the anterior chain. You're not able to actually really have good breathing mechanics on an exhale to manage pressure. As the weight gets heavier on a bar or whatever, that's when you're going to see poor breathing mechanics change. And this is natural. And this happens because of compression from the weight. I tell this happens to even me when I'm squatting or when I have a barbell landing on me or catching on me or pushing on my system somewhere. Because of that excess weight is pushing on my rib cage or my system, it's going to change where air is going. But also, it's going to make my system say, hey, there's a lot of weight on your body. Your tissues need to concentrically have a state of being concentric oriented. This weight doesn't tear apart and we don't risk muscle damage. As the weight gets heavier, tissue becomes more concentric to be able to, for us to survive. Then as that becomes more concentric, compression of a rib cage becomes a little bit tougher because you're now trying to be a lot of concentric action on an exhale that's more concentric and pressure management. You're going to feel that pressure really start to increase in the system as you exhale and go down. It's going to be a fight as you go up. It's not really poor breathing mechanics. Some people might have it. Some people might get away with lighter weights, but as the weights go in and the weight starts to threaten their system, they can't manage that pressure. They're going to go into their poor breathing mechanics. Hip flexors are going to turn on. Lower backs are going to turn on. Upper necks are going to turn on. Back and necks are going to turn on. Whatever it is, they're going to perceive something getting tight to move that weight or to move that, to perform that movement. And if you are getting body weight tightness, it might be something where you're just out of alignment. It is very, very complicated, a lot going on with poor breathing mechanics, but a simple way to fix that is to teach yourself how to breathe under stress, because that's what really weight training is breathing under stressful situations and being able to take air in and not go too sympathetic. One good term I love using is that sympathetic threshold. When the body hits a sympathetic threshold, it's going to go into fight or flight. It might extend and use all those muscles to concentrically orient to become tight, but not in a good way. We want to be able to understand the sympathetic threshold, but not lose posture and pattern position. Take an exercise, the dead bug. You can grab a weight, 45-pound plate, make it kind of sort of a heavy weight, lie on your back. As one leg goes out and you're feeling your abs on, exhale all that air out. Get all that air out of your body and feel how much compression your body can create and then hold it there for a pause. And then on the next inhale, you're going to keep your rib cage, your lower rib cage tight, and you're going to breathe air in. It might be minimal air, and it might only come up in the upper rib cage a little bit, but we're trying to prevent the low rib cage from expanding too much. That's where you're going to feel that pressure increase a little bit because your brain's not getting as much air as it's used to, and it's going, I need more air. But in your head, say, hey, I'm okay. I have plenty of oxygen. Exhale and create more pressure, more pressure. And this can be done seated. This can be done in all fours. It can be done in any position. All you have to do is inhale, exhale all that air out, round your middle back, your T8 to T12 that we've been talking about backwards, and feel your body go into slight flexion. Exhale, get all that air out, all of it out, and you're going to feel your deep ab contraction. And then keep that ab contraction and keep that tension and take another inhale without losing that tension. That's when you're going to feel the sympathetics kick in a good way because there's tension throughout the system, but that keeps our breathing mechanisms in check. What that does is as we go to breathe, our diaphragm wants to pull down and flat, and that's going to pull the attachment at the lumbar spine forward. If we become too reliant on not using abs, our diaphragm becomes our postural stabilizer. That will try to become an ab and hold the spine and rib cage in position, which over time is you're going to run into breathing mechanic problems, tension, tightness, hyperinflation, hypersympathetic tone. It's not going to be good. We want to manage our system in a more flexed state with abs on as we breathe in, and that gets you into this little bit of threat because you're not getting as much air as you think you're getting, and then you're building on that compression, the exhale. Try 5 inhales and exhales. Really build. This is where we have to use balloons and PRI to teach people how to manage pressure, that back pressure coming from the balloon as we exhale in and out. Before we even get people squatting or deadlifting, we need to teach them how to manage air first. Now, in a session, most people think, oh, we're just working on breathing in a session. Yeah, but we're working in positions too. I'm putting people in positions like side planks, front planks, all 4 belly lifts, some of the PRI techniques that forces them into learning how to breathe. And then when we get upright into the squats, their brain's already learning the mechanics on how to breathe and sense that, and then we can go from there. It is a good thought that people have when it's, oh, poor breathing mechanics. How can people still manage squats and deadlifts with no pain? They just might not be at their threshold yet. And if someone does have pain right out of the gate and there's really no threshold, there might be a bar or body weight. That tells me as a clinician that their body's not in the position to be able to shut those muscles, that certain muscle chains off to allow that pain to subside. We need to work a little bit more breathing. We need to get them to sequence their breathing a little bit better before we put them into positions and then go from there. That wraps us up for today. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, please reach out to us. Check us out at thinkfitnesslife.com. You can check us out on Instagram at thinkfitnesslife. I'm on Instagram at eric.meshy.prt. If you have any thoughts or questions about any of the PRI stuff we talked about or are interested in more, go check out some of my Instagram posts. I implement PRI in my strength training every single day, and I show you how I implement it through certain lifts. And there's some individual videos on PRI techniques. And as we go, we'll get more and more out. People can see different techniques and how to manage air.
Matt
Until
Gluckman
next
and
time,
Eric Mencher here from
we'll
Think
see you
Fitness
then.
Life. Our entire careers have been dedicated to fitness, particularly how the mind helps the body. We've been around gyms and nutrition strategies for 25 plus years collectively, and nothing harms or helps better than your own mind, untrained or trained. Pushing beyond your limits, overcoming whatever's thrown your way, and making the decision to show up day in and day out as a lifestyle takes more soul than sand. And what I mean by that is when you can get your mindset and heart leading you consistently in the direction of your goals and dreams, well, it's just a matter of time before you have the performance, physique, or quality of life you're yearning for. See, your thoughts will stem from your beliefs, which will then lead you to action, which develop into your behavior and ultimately lead you to results. It's really that simple. Our process takes time and it takes open communication. It's amazing what pops up along the fitness journey to betterment, and we can be there every step of the way. To learn more or apply for coaching, visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com. Start recreating your life today.